He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
This is The Alex Marlow Show, and I'm glad you're here. A monster week for the show gets even bigger. Eric Trump will be here momentarily. I just finished recording with him on his book, Under Siege, and you're going to love it. You're going to get to know him very well. But a lot of good stuff happening. We broke earlier on the show this week that ICE has received 175,000 applications from Americans to work there. Pretty cool, and that's something that's been shared widely across the internet. I'm looking at a tweet from the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. 5,200 retweets, 26,000 likes. Very nice. 2,500 comments. Sometimes the comments are negative, though. Like the higher the comment number, it's not necessarily a positive. They call that a ratio, but this is a good ratio, and it's great stuff. And I'm glad to break some news on the show. I want to go through some of the stuff that's going on in the world before we turn it over to Eric Trump. But first, let me tell you about something that is very important. You know it's important to me. Dinesh D'Souza, his incredible new movie, Dragon's Prophecy, eye-opening, illustrates a 3,000-year-old mystery about Israel, the dark resurrection, and the end of days. The nation of Israel is a resurrected nation, but what if there was going to be a resurrection of another people, an enemy of Israel? After the horrific attack of October the 7th, the Dragon's Prophecy offers a new understanding of Israel, radical Islam, anti-Semitism, and biblical prophecy. Could it be that the fate of the world, of all humanity itself, is tied to what we're seeing in the Middle East? Based on the #1 international bestseller by Jonathan Cahn, The Dragon's Prophecy reveals how another realm could be transforming our world as we speak. So don't miss Dinesh D'Souza's new movie, The Dragon's Prophecy, which you can watch it now or buy the DVD at salemnow.com. That's salemnow.com, and you can watch it right now or buy the DVD. It's a great way to do it. It's a great movie. And you guys have heard my interview with Dinesh on it. You should all check out my interview, but also check out the movie itself. It's really good. You will learn a lot while you're entertained, and that's all we ask. All right, let's get into some stuff. I'll start with a shutdown update, which again is not much. And I'm headed to DC. I'll be leaving Sunday or Monday. I'll be out there. And there's not a lot of movement. I didn't think there'd be movement because tomorrow, mark it down, Saturday, it's going to be a no kings protest. So no kings. So this is the organized left-wing riot / protest faction that's all paid for, fake grassroots, AstroTurf. And we're going to see what they've got. And I think they're going to try to use that to get momentum. And I'll tell you, it's looking at the polls, it feels like the Republicans have some momentum. Democrats doing a little bit worse in the polls when you look at congressional ballots, when you look at who's predicted to win the House of Representatives in 2026. But that said, the Democrats still have the upper hand. It's just easier to message sometimes when you are on defense because you can actually, ironically, be on the attack. So when you're in power, sometimes it's harder because people drop out of your coalition when they're not happy with something you do. So the Democrats feel like they're going to win this still, even though they're not asking for much. And it is clear that this is really all about Chuck Schumer's political future and getting health care for illegal aliens, or more health care for illegal aliens, government funded, more than they already get. And that's what this is all about. So still, the Democrats think they can win the messaging war. I don't see any evidence that they are at this point. And so the Senate's going to vote next week on a Republican proposal to pay federal employees who've been forced to work without pay during the shutdown. This includes military. So that'll be a big moment that'll come up early next week as well. But the Democrats are going to hold out for this no kings thing. That'll be Saturday, and we'll see how that plays out, whether or not that works for them or not. Other DC-centric stuff, we've got Zelensky meeting with Trump today. This is their 4th face-to-face meeting, and Z wants some more Tomahawk missiles. I think that's what he wants. He wants some big weaponry, and Trump wants to bring about a peace. So Trump is got a big meeting planned with Putin, as I brought up yesterday. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but Trump is spending a significant amount of time trying to make sure that this peace inevitably comes about between Russia and Ukraine, even though it was a war that was only started because Joe Biden was terrible at foreign policy and national security. All right, a big one. This is the big one. It was a shame because this was coming down right as I was finishing recording yesterday. So it's always fun when you can be the first out of the gate with the commentary. But John Bolton pleading not guilty to criminal charges. He was indicted yesterday, and he showed up at the court, plead not guilty today. And this is a bad one. And I'll tell you that a lot of people are saying this is political, this is vindictive, this is retribution. I don't care. First of all, I don't care, because after what was done to President Trump, and you're going to be reminded of a lot of it when we speak to Eric in a little bit, they had 6 major cases all coordinated with the Joe Biden White House to try to keep him off the ballot, to try to ruin his life, try to bankrupt him. And then they tried to kill him. And there were people who broke the same rules that that they tried to pin on Trump. Just like Tish James getting busted for mortgage fraud, they tried to bust Trump for fake mortgage fraud. It wasn't even real, but him inflating values of his property, even though there were no victims. It was a victimless non-crime, as I say. And so they hoist her on that petard. And now Bolton, who had these classified documents, and there's deep concern that he mishandled the classified documents. And this arose in 2020, so within the statute of limitation, because he published a memoir after the falling out with the president, sold 1 billion copies of it, made a lot of money from it, and he was perhaps undermining American national security with the information he divulged. So a judge reprimanded him. Recall this. I brought this up on the show, but I need to make the point again in case there are new listeners, and there are, and new viewers. But the judge initially reprimanded him for, even though he declined to stop the book from being published, because thousands of copies had already been printed and they shipped before. But the judge basically said that you should not do this. That he said that this is perhaps violating national security, and you really ought to think a second time before you put this thing out, even though the book was already printed. So he didn't stop it, but that was more, it sounds like, from what I was able to glean at the time, more of a courtesy to the publisher, rather than kind of giving them the option, like, look, we're not necessarily going to stop you, but this is bad news, and this might not be legal. So Bolton pled not guilty to criminal charges. Remember, Trump got busted over classified documents, even though he had unilateral declassification privileges. As I go through in Breaking the Law, Trump's team, they didn't need to end up making this case because the Jack Smith appointment, the Jack Smith special counsel, was unconstitutional. His whole appointment was a fake job. But I'll tell you that the case they were going to make, if this thing ended up seeing the light of day, is partially that the whole concept of classification, it is fundamental to the presidency that classification only exists because there is a president. So it's sort of a chicken and egg scenario where the whole concept, the whole nature of classification itself is dependent on there being a president of the United States that is able to determine such things. It really is something that is inherent to the president to define what classification means and what it doesn't. So in essence, if Trump has classified documents and he can do with them whatever he wants, it is inherent to the nature of the presidency, the classification process. So we know the entire nature of the Jack Smith special counsel was unconstitutional. That was why it was all thrown out. It was a fake job. Jack Smith never had a real job. It was an unconstitutional position. That's why it was thrown out. But what would have been really interesting is if that case had made it to a court, one of the things that there were 2 cases, but the classified documents case, if that had actually seen all the way through the legal process, one of the things the Trump team was prepared to argue is that the whole concept of classification is fundamental to the presidency itself, is innate to the president. The president essentially has unilateral ability to classify or declassify, and the whole point of it is the whole point of classification is essentially because the president wants something classified or not. So it really is arguably completely determined by the president what's a classified document. And John Bolton was a national security advisor. He had no right to any of these classified documents. He had no declassification privileges. And they took the long arm of the law and they went after Trump, who could have declassified those documents at any moment. And he alone could declassify them. And yet he was the one who was going to get I don't know, maybe disqualify for the presidency, maybe his whole life ruined over it. And so, of course, Trump is going to look for these opportunities to try to get his political enemies. Now, I talked about this a little bit. I was on Rob Schmidt's show on Newsmax. I'll try to pull these clips for you guys to do a better job of that. I pull a lot of them. But I was explaining that I don't care if this is vindictive or not. If you broke the law to undermine the presidency of the United States so that you could write a self-aggrandizing book where you could cozy up to the CNNs of the world and the MSNBC crowds and to get them to pay you money and perhaps undermine the American presidency, that level of selfishness is just, I don't have a lot of tolerance for it. And I'll tell you that I've interviewed John Bolton 100 times, 200 times. We spent a lot of time together. He was a weekly guest for me on Breitbart News Daily. He's a brilliant guy. He was hired as national security advisor. He did not do a very good job. He was in charge with Venezuelan policy, which was a disaster. He was not well liked. No one thought he did a great job. I think that he was a scary figure in the sense that his neocon bona fides, I think, is good to have in the room sometimes for negotiations because he's a little scary, a little unpredictable, and maybe he would recommend a strategic bombing that would be unexpected. I like that, but he didn't do well, and then he left and he just tried to undermine the president. And if he did so with illegally obtained or utilized documents, then of course the long arm of the law should come after him. And a lot of people are too focused on whether or not it's vindictive. That's not the point. You got to look at the law in a vacuum. You got to call balls and strikes here. And there are a lot of alleged abuses, a lot of alleged misuse of classified information. And it's something that those of us who knew Bolton are kind of still shocked by it and disappointed. So he was excoriated because for using these documents at the time in 2020. So if he was disclosing classified information in the book, then as the judge was suggesting at the time, then of course, if it's within the statute of limitations, of course, Trump's going to go after him for something like that. So I can't wait. You love to see it. You do. You love to see it. It's great. The bad guys there needs to be accountability, or else what are we and what are we doing here? All right, other things. So there's a debate in New York, Mamdani versus Cuomo. I'm not going to play clips just for the sake of time today, but Mamdani was much better than Cuomo at the optics of debating, as I would have predicted. And he's opened up a 21-point lead in a Fox News poll over Cuomo. Cuomo is just a uniquely horrible candidate. I said this when it was becoming clear it was Cuomo versus Mamdani. Mamdani might be the second least likable politician in America, but he's still not as bad as Cuomo. Cuomo's the least likable politician in the country. I don't see who he appeals to and why he should have any right to hold elected office again after his nursing home policy during the pandemic, for which he won an Emmy for misleading the public. And then when he got the Emmy, he called the Emmy buxom to his staff and was feeling it up and has a sordid record with women and all that stuff. He's just not the guy to be mayor of the city. And so you're going to have to try with Mamdani. That's what's going on here. He falsely accused Israel of genocide 3 times in the debate. I'm sure Cuomo was not effective in pushing back at that. Everything's a genocide now. This is where I'm just going to start calling everything genocide. I test drove this on my X account yesterday. I'm saying it's a attempted genocide of ICE. Because look, if what Israel was doing was a genocide, then everything's a genocide. The left cheapens language. My colleague Dennis Prager always pointed this out, that the left takes words and they use them until they have no meaning. One of the recent examples that we always discuss is rape, where the word rape used to mean something. It was very clear what it meant. And then all of a sudden, throughout the Me Too era, as that played out, then the definition got more confused. And this is what they do. They take words that we used to all know what it meant, and then they just water it down by overusing it. That's what we're doing here. So fine, let's do it. Let's call everything a genocide. Everything we don't like is now a genocide. Let's play that game. Let's do it. It's interesting because the left is so violent. I mean, I was just reading how Stephen Miller put his home in Arlington on the market because he's getting targeted too much. And it's just such a shame that people can't live if you have the wrong viewpoints. If you get the wrong viewpoints, then you just are attacked constantly all the time in this country. And those viewpoints are our viewpoints, the viewpoints that we have at Breitbart News. It's just, you have to fear for your life, as evidenced by my friend Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. So just an important reminder that the left are the ones that harbor these violent tendencies, and then they're constantly accusing their enemies of being more violent or worse or more evil than we are. So that is really, really important to note that they're the ones who keep acting as though our speech is violence, where their violence is protected speech. The Democrats are really on the hot seat with this guy, Jay Jones, who's running for attorney general in Virginia, who had fantasized about killing his political opponents and even his children dying. And that's just the left is having a really hard time disavowing him. Hakeem Jeffries was asked about it, and he said he appropriately apologized for his remarks. Just imagine if someone on the right was fantasizing about murdering a political rival and seeing their kids die. And then if you look at the text messages, he justified it by saying people only move politically when they feel personal pain. So that is really important to note, that it was not some sort of a blowing off steam comment. This was a really calculated point that Jay Jones, who could be the Attorney General of Virginia, was making, that was sanctifying violence against political violence in this country. It's very dangerous. It's a minority of people who hold this viewpoint, but it's growing, and they are literally attacking us with violence. Case in point, the Charlie Kirk assassination. Post Charlie Kirk assassination, we have to have zero tolerance for this stuff. We can't tolerate any of it. All right, last thing that I'll bring up before we bring in Eric Trump is the Mitch McConnell falling over in walking around the Capitol, falling over. Look, guys, we need term limits for the Senate. It's such a bad look for the country. And Mitch McConnell, I have no idea why he's still in power. I know his seat is opened up, and he's going to get replaced by someone younger. It's going to be an interesting race out there. Nate Morris, who's been endorsed by Don Jr., was endorsed by Charlie Kirk before he died, versus a couple of guys who are more in the McConnell camp. But Daniel Cameron, who I've met, I like Daniel Cameron. But he's cited McConnell as his top advisor in life and top mentor. So that's tough. It's not a great look right now. But McConnell just hanging on. He can't even walk around. And I hope he's okay and all that. But it's not a great look for the country when we're run by people who are ancient and clinging to power. It's that simple, right? I mean, it's an important point to make. Okay, I think that's good for now. It's a good news roundup. I like a good news roundup. And now you've got your good news roundup. And next up is going to be a half an hour with Eric Trump on his book, Under Siege, which is terrific. And you all should buy it and read it. But let him tell you all about it. Here is Eric Trump. All right, we're pleased to have Eric Trump back on the show. This time we are talking about Under Siege, his book, which I have now completed. I've read it, and it's fantastic. If you guys like the Trumps, you're going to love this book, because you really do. It's a memoir, but it is something where you get a lot of insight into what it would be like to have Donald Trump as your father, what it's like to be the actual apprentice of Donald Trump, which I think Eric turned out to be more than anyone else, and just how Trump does what he does in a way with a lot of love and charisma, and just fantastic insight here and a lot of detail. And Eric, I want to pull out some highlights here that I think are important. One thing that I think is crucial, and this is where I want to start, is that you worked on The Apprentice with him, Celebrity Apprentice, and it was so much more foundational to his political rise, having read your book, than I had even thought. And I've thought, a few thousand hours thinking about your family and your dad over the last decade. I don't think I quite knew how important that was to him, and how important that was to you and you being able to take over the Trump organization. But let's start with your dad first. How important was that show to him finding his political footing?
Well, listen, I'll never forget when Mark Burnett and NBC came into my father. Remember, CBS was winning with Survivor. NBC was literally dying. They were almost going out of business. Maybe we should have let them go out of business, by the way, in kind of retrospect, based on who they've become. But I remember he shook hands with Mark Burnett, and they came up with a concept called The Apprentice. And that really made my father a household name. Not that everybody didn't know who Donald Trump was, and he built casinos, and he was a big, real estate mogul. But that brought him into everybody's house. That made him a couch figure within people's homes. And, they saw his humor, they saw his compassion, they saw his toughness, they saw his smarts. They had the entertainment value. Apprentice became the #1 show on TV. I think the first season, the only program that beat it that entire year, and just barely the season finale, was the Apprentice. And he got better and better and better. And I remember you're sitting there with The Apprentice, and you've got 70 cameras, 2 cameras on each contestant, 2 or 3 cameras on every one of the judges. You have booms flying all over the place. And all at one time, all those lights come on, and there's no do-overs. It's like politics. There's no do-overs. Once you get the momentum going, once Meatloaf screaming at Gary Busey, right? You can't just say, guys, hold up for 1 second, let's adjust something, right? Because you lose the flow of the show. And so over 14 seasons, he became incredible. I was on the last 7 seasons, every season of Celebrity Apprentice, and you couldn't mess up. You either performed or you just weren't on the show. And it made us comfortable on the stage. It made us comfortable in front of the cameras. It certainly made us a household name. He became beloved by so many people. And there's no question that was a huge catapult, as bizarre as that is, to his political fame and to going back into people's living room just in a very different sense.
Yeah, Meatloaf, R.I.P. One thing that was really important that came through in this section of the book was how the cameras always being on, that prepares the whole family for political life, because you can't always have time to retreat to your talking points and rehearse slogans and be able to read a teleprompter. You have to be able to move on your feet. And that's what your father does better than anyone, but you do that very well yourself. I remember, I've told you this before, but I remember one of my favorite moments of the campaign in 2016 was watching you take down a whole panel of CNN journalists trying to offer Hillary Clinton talking points. And you were a really young guy then, and you were just all taking them all to school on CNN. They had no idea what was coming. And it was probably because you cut your teeth on the show.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And by the way, Alex, let me just put one thing out. There are a lot of high-profile people who can't do it, right? I mean,
yeah,
I remember
right.
I tell a story in the book in Under Siege about this, CEO of a major company. I won't say what it is. I just don't want to embarrass the guy, but are you ready? My father asked him, "Are you ready, sir? I'm an executive." I mean, I've never heard such kind of like a brash, egotistical, "Sir, I'm an executive. I've got this, sir." And literally all those red lights flashed on at one time. You've got 20 celebrities looking. You've got, dozens of people in the crew. You've got my father and myself, and I think it was Don on that episode. We're all staring at him, and literally his mouth just stopped working, right? And, people think it's easy until you actually have to sit there and perform. And there's some people who are really good at it, and, there's other people who will choke under pressure. And, we learn not to choke under pressure. I think my father's the best pressure player I've ever seen in my entire life, right? I mean, his greatest lines come in the greatest pressure moments, right? After Access Hollywood and a couple other, less than maybe perfect moments, right? Some of his greatest campaign lines flew, and he was always amazing. I mean, remember the Hillary Clinton, because you'd be in jail. I mean, just off the top. I mean, he won the debate just with, 4 or 5 words. He killed her in that debate, and he was always one of these pressure players that. I see that with him in golf too. We'll be opening a course. You'll have 1,000 people. He'll be hitting the first tee shots. He always hits it right down the middle, right? And, other people are whiffing it. Even good golfers, right? They can't handle the pressure. He's always been great at handling the pressure.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have heard that. I have not had a chance to play golf with him before, but I've got a story about how I actually was supposed to play golf with him right before he announced his candidacy, and it got canceled last minute, and it never happened. But
we're going to make it happen.
Put that on my bucket list.
We're going to make that happen.
Thank you. That'd be fantastic. Okay, so he was beloved by Democrats when he's on the show.
Yeah.
And now they hate him, and they hated him almost instantly. Did your family ever get used to that?
It's hard to get used to that. Alex, I go into a couple of really good friends that I lost. And I'm talking about, when I say good friends, I'm talking about brothers. I'm talking about my best friend in the world. I mean, every vacation, every this, when we went to college and schools that were next to each other, we spent every single night hanging out. I mean, you name it. And I'll never forget, I opened up Instagram one day, very early on, and his brother, who is effectively his twin, I mean, they were a year apart, but effectively twins, his wife was walking in one of these, female, kind of pink hat marches with their kids with vile signs about my father. And I remember sending to him, and I said, "Andy, what the hell is this?" Like, I mean, I was in the brother's wedding. I was one of the best man, and I'm not going to tell my wife to, and people would turn like this. And these are some of the closest people in your life. Now, Alex, at the same time, people came into our lives that didn't need to be there, right? That were with us in the lowest times. And I would take one of those people over 100 of the other all day long. But, NBC, I mentioned them before. I mean, NBC, my father kept that station alive. 14 seasons of The Apprentice made them billions of dollars. And he told them he wasn't going to renew the show. He hops on that escalator. He gets to the bottom of the escalator, and they turn on him like he was a dog, like they had never met. I mean, a guy that literally saved their network, that they idolized. Every commercial was about how great Donald Trump was. The second he gets to the bottom of that escalator, they treat him as if he was an absolute dog, like they had never met him before. It's amazing how fragile that world is.
Yeah, it really is. And it's amazing to relive some of that through the book. But I want to ask you the big question. When did you realize you were the real apprentice? You were actually the one who was going to take over the Trump organization, one of the most legendary organizations in the world.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit when I was the last one standing. Honestly, he came to me and he goes, "Honey, I really want you to," and everybody knows I love real estate, right? Everybody knows I love building. Like I've got that genetic. I love concrete. I love steel. I love the trades. I love, sexy buildings. I'm really, really good at it. It's how my mind works. It's how my mind sees things. I have an engineering brain. And he goes, "Honey, listen, you've built so many of the properties, you've assembled so many of the teams, you've run so much of this company." Obviously, when he was campaigning in 2015, 2016, I was out there campaigning, but I was also de facto the guy that was running, the company. I was kind of doing both. And he goes, "I want you to take this whole thing over." Now, never did I think that 95% of my time was going to be dealing with exactly this, the siege. Right? That's what I was dealing with. I thought I was going to be building nice hotels. I thought I'd be running nice, golf properties, residential buildings, commercial buildings. Never did I think I was going to be embroiled in Russia scandals, dirty dossiers, IRS leaking our tax returns, 112 subpoenas, weaponized DAs and AGs, getting canceled, getting silenced. Never before did I think I was going to have to deal with that. And, you just learn. I actually became more of a psychologist than I did a business person. I became a psychologist to 10,000 people in our company who were all under attack by these people as they were trying to bribe them and they were trying to coerce them and they were trying to extort them to say anything negative about Donald Trump that they could use to otherwise take down his candidacy. They pulled out every single stop. You know what? If you don't tell me something about Donald Trump, I'm coming after you. I'm coming after your children. They said it that blatantly. They extorted people. They destroyed lives in an effort to get to my father. And I have to say, to the credit of our company, none of those people broke. They didn't break.
Yeah, it really was interesting to think of it from that perspective because you've got a couple of points in the book where you're clearly reassuring the company that, yes, this is completely unprecedented. What we're going through is completely unfair, but we're going to survive it and we're going to be okay. And that's a tough message to send because you guys were balancing, you in particular, Eric, were balancing a company and a presidency because the president to focus on the country and surviving all this stuff. You kind of had to do both.
You wouldn't imagine how difficult it is to walk through office doors with a smile on your face, being jovial, because that's what you needed to convey. After you got hit by a $600 million judgment, of which if you can't post a bond, and the attorney general was going to every bonding company saying, "You don't give Trump that bond because you're a licensed, a surety in the state of New York, and I will pull your license." She was saying that to them, right? And I had to walk in. They were going to seize our buildings if we didn't post a bond, and she was actively telling them not to post bonds as the attorney general of New York. And you have to walk into an office with a jovial face, laughing, smiling, and being confident about the situation, right? It was demeanor mattered. Perception mattered. Confidence mattered, right? The spirit of your employees mattered. I'm telling you, it was, again, this wasn't being a real estate executive at that point. It was really being a psychologist of people who were hurting because they were doing everything they could to destroy their livelihoods for no reason whatsoever, other than the fact that Donald Trump wore a hat that said, "Make America Great Again."
Right. Yeah, one thing that does come through in the book, I don't want to dwell on too much, but I want to share this with the audience in Under Siege. You do feel like you get to know President Trump a lot better, a lot of his personal touches, why he was so effective, some of his principles about positivity and living an aspirational lifestyle and working with people you like. He obviously prioritizes loyalty quite a bit. And a lot of that stuff is really great to read. But one thing I want to ask before we move on to the siege section of the book, Eric, is tell me about your summers, because rich and famous father, you must have spent it, on a yacht somewhere. Is that how growing up, like that was how you spent most of your free time?
So Alex, a lot of people wouldn't possibly believe this because it probably doesn't happen in these circles, as you can imagine. But no, we were put on construction sites every single summer of our life. Every summer of our life, we were, and this is demo. This is breathing in the nastiest crap. I'm sure I've taken in plenty of asbestos and everything else, right? You're breaking down old walls in buildings and mansions. It's running HVAC, conduit, plumbing, running chainsaws, cutting rebar with acetylene torches, running backhoes and excavators and everything else, every mower under the sun. It's what I did every single summer, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, right? It taught you the value of a dollar. It taught you kind of the building blocks of the trades that you'd ultimately be responsible for. I mean, I wired half my house when Laura and I bought it. I just enjoy doing that stuff, and I'm exceptionally.
Yeah, I was going to say, does she like it? Because I feel like that'd be the sort of thing that the wife Laura would probably love.
You know, when we first started dating, I was running effectively outlets and receptacles into my closet, right? I didn't have any in my closet, and she's sitting there saying, "What the hell are you doing? You're gonna electrocute yourself. Why don't you call somebody to do that?" I'm like, "This is all I did every single summer. I love it, right?" And by the way, I still love it. I love tools. I love building. It's so ingrained in my head. It's what I do on my free time. Literally, I just like getting dirty and I like working with my hands. But you would never think that of the son of a billionaire who grew up in an ivory tower, and it's so. But my father was amazing. It was, we were spoiled in that we had the best education, we were fed, and we were warm, right? But if we wanted something, we were going to work for it. We weren't the kids that were getting Ferraris when we were 16 years old. That would absolutely never, ever happen in the Trump family. We weren't getting the corner offices in Trump Tower. We were getting a cubicle in some back dark corner, not the corner office. And every single time, he'd give you a task that you thought was insurmountable. And you would work your butt off on it, and you would prove that you were good at it, and then you get a slightly bigger task and a slightly bigger task. But Alex, if I wasn't good at what I did, I would not be here right now. I would not be sitting in that seat. And rest assured, he would not have called me in at 33 years old and said, "I want you to take over a $15 billion global real estate empire." Trust me, there would have been somebody else for that job.
Okay, before we get to see stuff, I'm indulging myself one more time. I love the story in the book where your dad's calling you in the middle of the night talking about whether or not you should move a bunker on one of the golf courses. As someone who's interested in golf architecture, I know that those intricacies can really make or break golf courses, but you got to have a real precise brain for that sort of thing. It made me wonder, do you have a favorite property, favorite golf course, favorite hotel that of all those in your portfolio that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like picking your favorite child, right? I mean, I built all of them. I love all of them. I know every one of them. But you're right about Donald Trump. I mean, him and he'll call up and say, Eric, on the 7th hole at Turnberry, about 300 yards off the tee on the left-hand side. Yeah, that bunker right there. Yep, right over to the left of that bunker. If we were to take out that swale and we were moving inland a little bit more, you'd pick up a little bit more carry. You'd have a better shot to the green. And him and I are doing this, meaning by imagination, knowing that we know the properties that well. But listen, what I built at Turnberry, Turnberry is number 2 in the world right now. Trump Aberdeen, I just built one of the greatest courses ever built. I think it's going to be a top 5 course anywhere in the world. The first course already, top 20. We've got the greatest portfolio of golf courses in the world, and I love that business. I mean, I love the high-rise business, obviously, but I truly love the golf business.
Yeah, I should probably talk to you about this offline, but I'm turning 40 in a couple months, and I got Trump Turnberry on my short list of where I should spend that birthday.
You call me, and I promise you'll have the greatest birthday you've ever had. I will make sure of it, Alex.
I might have to do this. I don't need to get the audience involved in this anymore, but it really is pretty cool. It truly is legendary. It's not just a great golf course. It's on one hand, best golf courses on earth. And that's one of many great courses. But anyway, I'm indulging myself too much. I want to get to the focus of the book. There is so much great stuff in it, but the main thing is to go through what your family had to deal with. No other family has ever had to deal with this in American history. And it's energizing. It is energizing to read about the siege and how you guys beat it, how you overcame it. How many subpoenas did you get, Eric Trump?
112. 112 subpoenas, the most subpoenas that we know about in history toward one person, one company. No one's been subpoenaed more. And by the way, these aren't like baby subpoenas. These are all coming from, Senate intelligence, House intelligence, the biggest people, the biggest attorney generals, the biggest DAs in the country, and they were all fishing, right? It's, give me, Alex, every single subpoena I'd get, give me every email and they'd list every word under the sun, but they would always include the words national and international. Right. The reason for this is all of our hotels are Trump International Hotel and Tower, right? And all of our golf courses are Trump National Golf Course. And so every email signature in the entire company contains one or both of those words. So,
oh my God.
So then we go to judge, say, Judge, this is just a fishing expedition. They're not investigating something. They're just asking for every document so they can comb through, 15 years of everything we've done as a company and see if they can find a comma that's out of place. That's illegal. That's phishing. That's not, that's not a targeted investigation based on anything specific. And then you get one of these corrupt judges in New York, Engoron or one of these guys, and nope, we're going to let it fly. And so all of a sudden, 22 million emails and documents and every page, and they still couldn't find anything our company did wrong. They still couldn't get us on anything. That's how good we were. We never played even close to gray. We were a black and white company who ran an unbelievable organization that had no employees break, right? We were really, really good at what we did. And any other company, they would have found something. They would have found some seedy email. They would have found some bad statement. They would have found something. They couldn't find anything. That's how good we were at what we did, and that's how honest we were, despite the fact that the whole thing cost us $400 million. But despite that, it was also the Russia hoax, the secret servers in the basement of Trump Tower, which was nonsense. It was, it was the dirty dossier. The IRS, and no one ever mentions this, leaked every tax return of my father to the New York Times, leaked every tax return of mine to the New York Times, leaked all our corporate executives' tax returns to the New York Times. You want to talk about criminality? The IRS was handing newspapers our tax returns. There's a guy in jail for it right now based on what they did. Then they silenced us. Then they deplatformed us. Then they debanked us. Shopify, threw us off their platform like we were dogs, all of our e-commerce. They took my father off of the ballots of multiple states, as you know so well, 91 indictments. 34 of those indictments were over $100,000. Al Capone was indicted once. My father was indicted 34 times over $100,000 payment he didn't even make. You had the mugshots. You had the raids on Mar-a-Lago, the raids on Melania's room, the raids on Barron's room, the 30 FBI agents, the Jack Smith planting documents at Mar-a-Lago. It went on and on and on.
It's a total onslaught. And I was just thinking about the Comey incident. I think what we're going to find, what I reported in my book, Breaking the Law, was that he had leaked documents to this professor with the intention of getting them to the New York Times. And that's what that's about. So it's all about how do we get stuff in the New York Times to give your family a hard time? That really was the plan, and they were never going to stop. So with all these subpoenas, 112, what was all the bad stuff that they found that you were doing, Eric?
Nothing. The Letitia James case got overturned 5-0, including the presiding judge of the state of New York. The entire penalty was thrown out in full. I couldn't believe I was sitting in a courtroom where she was accusing us of fraud, and the bank that she was accusing us of fraud with was up there testifying that we were the greatest borrower they've ever had, that we made them hundreds of millions of dollars, we never missed a loan payment, we were never in default, we never breached a covenant. But yes, somehow we were these fraudsters. It was unbelievable. But she was on a mission to take us out. She has a corrupt judge, right? And thank God the appellate court, overturned it. But the same thing with Fulton, Georgia, right? With Fannie Willis. All the courts threw out that case and is nowhere. The same thing with, Jack Smith. The case threw out, the judge threw out that case. The same thing with Mershon in New York. The case ended up just, fizzling out and going away. The 91 indictments all disappeared. They wanted my father to be in a jail cell. They wanted my voice gone. They wanted us off that stage. They wanted my father dead, hence Butler and hence Palm Beach. They wanted the same thing for that to my father and to me that they did to Charlie Kirk, our good friend. They wanted to silence him. And by the way, they want to silence all of us, right? I'm talking about us right here in the book, in this part of the book. But the aspirational part of this whole thing is, well, first of all, they want to do it to all of us. They wanted all conservatives silenced. They wanted us threatened. They wanted us intimidated. To look at just January 6th and what happened there, right? They weaponized the IRS against churches and religious institutions and conservative causes. DEI, how many people were passed up based on some DEI hire who came in and leapfrogged them based on no criteria and no necessarily, no skill, but based on some make-believe criteria that was in the workforce. Woke was affecting everybody. They threatened our family unit. They threatened our voice. But the amazing thing is we all won, right? The very people that they put under siege in this country, we won. We won by the greatest margin in American political history, winning the popular vote, winning every swing state, winning every state in the country tacked to the right. It was the greatest upset, right? And so the very siege that they did to us in an effort to quell the greatest political movement ever backfired on them. And we've restored democracy, we've restored the Constitution, we've restored religion, we've restored the Second Amendment, we've restored family in this nation, we've ended wokeness. And so it ended up being the greatest victory of all time. And the siege was worth it. Everything we went through in this book, everything we went through in the siege was worth it.
Amazing. Yeah, it gets me fired up because it just reminds you of how bad the bad guys are. And my audience has heard me talk a lot this year about the content of my book, Breaking the Law, which is we the same publisher, Threshold Editions at Simon & Schuster. They do a really nice job with these books, and they do fight for free speech, which I like, even though big corporation, kind of rare to see that. So they do a nice job with these books. And I'll tell you though, Eric, you have a few details I didn't have, but I really am interested in some of the personal stuff that you point out, that when your dad got COVID, your school called you up and said, don't bring the kids to school, even though they don't even live in the same state. And as if that was related, the debanking, you get into some of that, how your family's been targeted in that way. These are nasty, nasty people who are trying to destroy your family. Are there any specific things that you feel like you want to shed some light on to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons I got the hell out of New York. Aside from Letitia James, and aside from a state that's kind of going to hell based on, communism, you saw that in the debate, last night. I never forget getting that call. Do not bring your son to school today because your father has COVID. And I go, excuse me, I live in New York. My father lives in the White House. He's 240 miles away. I'm not sure if I understand. Our faculty is petrified of your family and getting COVID from your family. And literally, and by the way, this was like a 10:45 p.m. text, probably influenced by a couple of glasses of wine by a principal. I'll never forget this. And I went crazy. I blew up. I said to Laura, listen, we got to get out of here. But, she's like, you know what, we'll let, a friend take them to school. I go, I'm going to take my child to school. And I literally walked up to the school the next morning and I dropped my child off. I mean, imagine telling a father they can't take their kid to school.
Because their grandfather has a virus 300 miles away.
And by the way, the great irony of all of this is I never had it, never got it, right? About a week later, her husband, right, ended up getting COVID, and we got a letter to the entire school, I contracted the coronavirus, and therefore we're going to have to shut down the school. And they're saying, you know what? Sometimes karma works in our favor. Yeah. And it was an amazing thing. The very person who told me not to get the school infected got the school infected.
The debanking that you went through and your family went through was even more extensive than I knew. The list of banks is just shocking. Where are we at with some of these banks? Has any of them made amends? Capital One seems like was a really bad one. Have any reached out since and said we got that wrong, or is that continue?
Well, I just sued Capital One. They were by far the worst. It was over 300 bank accounts. They were turned off almost instantaneously, left us high and dry. I can't tell you the amount of sleepless nights from dozens and dozens and dozens of people. I mean, think about the biggest commercial buildings, right, in the world, with hundreds of tenants, thousands of people in them, hundreds of employees, real estate taxes, lockbox provisions, and syndicated loan contracts. Where they pull your bank account and you're immediately in default of your loan agreements, where a loan can get called. You did nothing wrong. You've been operating these buildings for 30 years. You did nothing wrong other than the fact that your father walked on stage with a hat that said, "Make America Great Again," that somehow tickled somebody at the upper echelons of these companies. And, Capital One was horrible. Bank of America was horrible. JP Morgan Chase was horrible. First Republic was horrible. Shopify, the big e-com platform, absolutely terrible. I mean, terrible people. Aon Insurance, the largest insurance broker in this country. We had done insurance with them for 30 years. They pulled us out like we were dogs. And listen, the list is long, but and distinguished. But it's really amazing, Alex. Now every one of them comes back and kisses your ass, right? And I don't mean to be profound, but I've gotten calls from the top. I mean, the heads of every single one of these banks. Oh yes, Eric, we would really like to re-engage. We'd like to have a wonderful working relationship. You left us high and dry. You didn't give a damn that you couldn't pay your employees based on the fact that you cut off the payment rails to an entire company. You didn't give a damn about these people. These are housekeepers. These are engineers. These are drivers. These are security officers. These are waiters and waitresses that work in hospitality. You didn't give a damn about these people. You just wanted to see Trump gone and destroyed, right? Because you were part of the siege. And so we were getting hit on every angle, whether it's the DAs, AGs, the censorship, the legal bills. We spent $400 million, as I said before, the dirty dossiers. And we were getting hit on every single front. And because I was the guy that ran the Trump organization, I became the piñata for all of it.
Unbelievable. Eric, the last couple of questions I got for you are about something personal to you as your charity work. You write a lot about St. Jude's Children's Hospital. I want you to talk about St. Jude's for a second.
St. Jude's is the greatest children's research hospital in the world. I started a foundation when I was 20 years old. I raised $50 million for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, 9.2% cumulative expense ratio, the lowest expense ratio in the country. We built the largest ICU dedicated to dying children anywhere in the world at St. Jude. The sickest children on planet Earth are in the Eric Trump Foundation, ICU. And when Hillary was getting killed, all right, for her charitable work, because, Haiti was a disaster and they were flying, G550s all over the world on charitable funds, and they were being investigated. And, the rest of the story behind the Clinton Foundation. They needed a counter narrative. They needed me. And I'll never forget the Attorney General getting up in front of the ceiling in New York, totally unexpectedly. I had no idea it was coming. Today, we begin to investigate the Eric Trump Foundation for fraudulent activities. And I'm sitting there saying, holy crap, what fraudulent activities? What fraudulent? We're the number one fundraiser for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We are beloved. I was on the board of the hospital. We had no expenses. We didn't even have a corporate employee. That's how concerned we were about. We did charity better than anybody, but they needed a narrative. They needed somebody to take down. And so we sent them every document, 18 months of hell. And sure enough, nothing ever came of it until a reporter goes up to the Attorney General 18 months later. Are you still investigating the Eric Trump Foundation? Yes, we are actively investigating that. It was all BS. But they needed a counter narrative to their friend Hillary Clinton, who was getting absolutely destroyed for her bad work in charity. And so guess what? They came after me, and they came after those children at St. Jude, and I will never, that was my first subpoena, I will never forgive them for that one.
It's an amazing contrast, Eric Trump Foundation, which is trying to help kids with rare diseases, versus the Clinton Foundation, which is trying to enrich the Clintons, which goes out of business the second they lose power, and we play that up so constantly, Eric, and it was still even a much bigger scandal than even we gave it credit for. The book is Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. Last one for the day. What is the main thing you want to accomplish with this book?
I want to make sure revisionist history never happens, that they cannot delete the pages of the story that happened to not only our family, but by default, everyone listening to right now, and you personally, Alex, everybody at Breitbart, everybody. They were doing this to you. They were doing this to all of our friends, everybody who I love who's listening to us right now, every MAGA supporter. They were doing it to all of you. And you need to understand what our government was doing to all of us. And that's why I wrote this. I never want to be a number one best-selling author. This wasn't my world, right? And people are speaking with their pocketbooks like never before. I mean, this has gone so viral because everybody was influenced by this story, and everybody in this country needs to understand it, and it can never, ever, ever happen again.
That's right. It's a good read, too. Everyone should pick it up. Under Siege. Eric, thanks as always for the time, and best of luck the rest of the way. But I got a feeling you got a number one book on your hands, which is a quite accomplishment. That's a Lifetime Achievement Award if there ever was one. But thanks for all the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you very much.